we should give the certificate. And Eva Maria, the new president, will give it to you. Yes, it's the best task. So, congratulations again. So some photos.
You should join us later.
So the new world with all the switches. We should avoid that now with the new owner. Okay. Awesome? Okay. So, and we are eager to listen and learn more on fiscal equalization in China.
Good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, I would like to say that I feel very honored and privileged to be here today. And thank you to the jury for this incredible recognition. And I would like to also thank Tracy, who was my PhD supervisor, and she provided useful suggestions for these papers. And I can't be more grateful for her help. And last of all, I would like to thank all for this amazing award. Thank you so much. So now I should proceed to my presentation. So good afternoon, everyone. So before the presentation, I would like to provide two caveats. So first, China is not a federal state. China is not a de jure federal state. So, but it is interesting that it is a regime with highly centralized political system coupled with a highly decentralized fiscal system, right? Or to be specific, expenditure decentralized fiscal system, like the local government or the subnational government, right? They bear the cost of providing public services. And the second caveat is that my story, right, only can expand China from 1995 to 2009 due to the data availability. So if you'd like to discuss what happened to China now, I will put it to the Q&A sections, right? So let me give you an overview of this paper. So since 1994, China's central government has introduced the tax sharing system reform with an intergovernmental transfer system aiming at addressing the mounting regional disparities. So different from most of the existing literature, starting on fiscal equalization that focus only on the policy analysis, this paper examines the effect of promotion-seeking officials on the horizontal fiscal equalization at subnational level. So building on the interdisciplinary literature on fiscal federalism and political budget circles, the central argument of this article is that an expenditure decentralized fiscal system and a performance-based casual evaluation system have jointly encouraged governors to decrease their efforts on promoting fiscal equalization at a critical timing during the tenure for their promotion, for their career perspectives. They strategically influence fiscal policy and use intergovernmental transfers as an investment to boost economic growth rather than to use it to address regional inequality. Why they do that? Because they want to increase the chance of being promoted to a higher level. So using panel data from 1995 to 2009, the analysis finds that there is a curvilinear relationship between a governor time in office and his effort to promote fiscal equalization. So the contribution of this paper is that beyond fiscal explanations, political institutions provide further incentive for provincial leaders to undermine the goal of horizontal fiscal equalization, right? And increasing the intra-provincial fiscal inequality in China. So let's take a look at this graph. So it shows that like how the governors influence the fiscal policy making, right, within the province, right, and how the cultural evaluation system, right, incentivize the governors to influence, right, the transfer policies, right, and this graph, it shows that the regional fiscal inequality in China has continuously increased even after the 1994 tax sharing system reform, right? And the intra-provincial inequality contributes to the majority of the overall regional inequality in China. So it is important to understand what caused the intra-provincial inequality, right? And this graph shows that the intra-provincial inequality in revenue in 1995, right? And this shows the inequality in 2009. You can see that it actually become more serious, right? So the overarching argument for this paper is that what could explain the persistence of intra-provincial inequality after the 1994 tax sharing system reform. So my central government is that the key explanatory variables for the persistence of intra-provincial inequality are the amount of discretion the governors maintain over fiscal resources, right, their fiscal autonomy to make the transfer policy, and the current political career-making structure of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Right. So beyond fiscal, so let's go to the theory part. So first of all, China is considered a federation-like country because of its highly decentralized fiscal system. So as you can see from this graph, the fiscal decentralization in China is larger and deeper than most of the countries in the world. Right. So compare the revenue side and the expenditure side, China is more decentralized than most of the country in the world. So this graph shows same story, the subnational government's share of budgetary revenue and expenditure in China. You can see is that while the revenue has been centralized after 1994, on the expenditure side, it is still highly centralized. For example, in 2008, the subnational government, right, have the 90% or 80% of the expenditure. So it is highly decentralized fiscal system. So the classical literature on fiscal equalization argues that the fiscal decentralization could increase horizontal fiscal inequality because of fiercely interjurisdictional competition. And fiscal federalism also empowers regional politicians who face different incentives to undermine the central government or the federal government's macroeconomic policy. However, the existing literature hasn't provided any insights from the political perspective, especially from the developing country, showing that how political institutions could affect horizontal fiscal equalization at subnational level. So that is why I need to draw on the second strand of the theory, which is the political budget circles. So the literature on the political budget cycles suggests that politicians who strategically manipulate economic policies before the elections, because the chance of being re-elected provide the incentives for them to do so. So the same logic can be applied to understanding politicians' incentives in China. So there has been immense numbers of studies that emphasize the importance of cadre incentives in shaping China's economic reform process. Although governors get substantial discretion on fiscal policy making, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, still has a way to control them through the cadre evaluation system. The decentralized personnel appointment system, in fact, enabled the CCP to shape the incentive structure of local governments, to implement the party policy preference. Moreover, economic growth has been the CCP's top priority since the 1980s. Many scholars find that the CCP is likely to promote those subnational officials with higher economic performance to a higher level. Given that subnational officials face such strong incentives are likely to exert significant effort to increase economic growth to appease their party committee in anticipation of political advancement. So another two key features of the cadre evaluation system are the fixed tenure and the age limitation. So constitutionally, governors in China have a fixed term for 5 years. So with the possibility to have a second tenure, so in total there are 10 years, which has been institutionalized since the reform and opening up. On the other hand, each level of cadres has the age eligibility rules for promotions. So if you are too old, you are unable to promote it to a higher level. So for example, provincial leaders are eligible for promotion to the next rank after the age of 63, and they are required to retire at the age of 65 if they haven't been promoted to a higher position to the central government. So given above, so it is rational to hypothesize that for governors to exert effort on improving their economic performance measured at the cost of increasing fiscal inequality, according to the classic career concern model. Moreover, governors must act strategically because too late or too early doesn't offer any help to their promotion, but run the risk of opposing central government's transfer policies, right, which will put them in risk. So they must act smart and strategically. So due to the time constraint, I'm going to run through the quantitative methods. So if you are interested, I will answer that in the Q&A section. So the dependent variable is the governor's equalization effort. So I use the coefficient of variation to measure their equalization effort. And the key independent variables are the time in office, how many years the governor has been in the office, and the square term of the office to capture the curvilinear relationship. So here is my model. And here is the description of variables, the definition and the source that I obtained those data. So here is the regression result. So the table 1 shows the regression result. So the model 1 is the baseline model, and the model 2 contains a number of control variables to control different economic conditions across provinces, except for economic inequality. So the model 3 also includes the economic inequality. And first of all, according to the regression results, the tenure effect, both linear and square terms, are significant in the models. So other thing being equal, a governor is likely to decrease his efforts since stepping into power. And the turning point for the tenure effort is at about 3.6 years. However, although the estimate coefficients generally have the size that I expect, it doesn't fully support the hypothesis. So according to this margin plot, it reveals that there is no significant change of governors' efforts for promoting fiscal equalization during their first 10 years. If you see, you can see on the right side, there's no significant change. Even though the regression results confirms that there is a curvilinear relationship between governors' equalization efforts and their tiny office, right, suggesting that effort will go down to the bottom in the third year and the first year in office. The effect is really small in the first tenure, in the first 5 years. However, it is still interesting to know that if a governor have a chance to have a second tenure, right, second term, his effort for promoting fiscal equalization will increase dramatically, if you can see the graph on the left side. The possible explanation for this result is that most governors do not compete, they did not complete a full 5 tenure. Hence, it is extremely hard to time their effort strategically to maximize their economic performance at the end of one's 10 years, at the first 10 years, because the specific time of departure is unknown. Moreover, the regression also reaffirms that the more, if you go back to that, the more governors, right, relies on the intergovernmental transfer to balance his expenditures, the more effort he would like to put to promote fiscal equalization. The more they depend on the central government transfers to balance their budget, the more efforts they will put to address fiscal equalization. Right. So it is also suggests that when a governor enjoys more power in government expenditures, he is less likely to follow the policy goals fiscal equalization made by the central government. Right. Other control variables are not statistically significant. So based on these empirical results, we can summarize that although governors will influence equalization policy at the end of their 10 years, they only fine-tune the distribution of intergovernmental transfers at subnational level because of the uncertainty of their time for promotion. However, it doesn't mean that governors will put a whole heart into promoting fiscal equalization in their first 10 years, because they still feel that they are likely to promote it in their first 10 years. But when into the second 10 years, after 5 years, if they have the second 10 years, and because of the age eligibility of promotion, they will start to promote the central government's policy goal, which is to promote fiscal equalization. So let's head to the conclusion. So although existing literature argues that fiscal equalization could aggravate fiscal disparity because of the interjurisdictional competitions, this study offers another explanation that political institutions could further increase it, right, and thus compromise the goal of central government, right, to promote fiscal equalization. Moreover, I also argue that the current Cargill evaluation system should be further reformed, shifting away from an obsession of economic growth. Otherwise, the economic reform can be unsustainable because the political institution falls further behind and in turn impedes the economic reforms in the long term. Therefore, without a fundamental change of the incentive structure for Cargill promotion, no matter how the central government or how in general the federal government, central government design the intergovernmental transfer system, it cannot achieve a desirable policy outcome, and the regional fiscal disparity is likely to be persistent consequently. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to your question and comment.
Great, thank you so much. We are running behind time, but I think we can steal 5 minutes for a short Q&A.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. Congratulations, very interesting, especially for, knowing what is going on back in China. It's not easy for us. A couple of comments. One is that what you really would like to go into is second generation fiscal federalism theory, which introduces political economy within fiscal federalism. And this is really where you are making a contribution to. Second, briefly, you said, I have an explanation to explain what is driving inequality. I don't think you're doing this. I think you have something better than that. We know what is driving inequality. Across countries, within countries, we know it in China as well. There's a lot of research about that. What you are doing, you are explaining to us while policies try to reduce inequality do not work because the political incentives are setting out wrong, which is by far more interesting. So I think your argument is that I'm going to explain why equalization doesn't reduce disparities in China. And this depends not on the economy or the way the fiscal federalism is designed, but it depends on how the political incentives are ill-structured, which to me is by far more interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will collect 3 questions because
Yep.
we seem to be under time pressure.
No problem.
Yes, thank you very much. I liked the paper before. You are using data until 2010. I know it's difficult to go further to the present, but I have learned, and I've been working on it, that there was an administrative reform in China, cutting the 5 levels of government to 3. And it was ongoing in the years after 2010. Did you ever look whether this changed the political motivation? Because you measured the inequality within a province
Yes.
and not among the provinces. There are no relations among the provinces or directly. You have just deliberate payments from Shanghai to Chengdu. But there is no real equalization effect on the transfer payments. The tax sharing system, only the rich provinces profit from that, and that's an imbalance from the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I just have a pretty basic question about fiscal federalism and what it means in China, right? So fiscal federalism, we usually understand that to mean who gets the tax, who gets to spend, who transfers to whom under what conditions. So, I mean, do we study China with this kind of fairly traditional understanding of fiscal federalism, or does it require any reconceptualization?
Yep. Thank you. So I think I can answer the first question and the last questions. Like you mentioned, how we mentioned about the 2 generations of fiscal federalism. So the first generation fiscal federalism focused on the public finance. Like they only focus on the tax and the finance system. That is purely policy analysis. But the second generation of fiscal federalism, right, raised by Weingast, he suggests that we should add political institutions into account, take a political institution into account. But his research or his argument is like on theory. He hasn't done any empirical research, and he hasn't provided any insights from the perspective of developing country where formal institutions is pretty weak in the developing countries, right? And how the political politics, right, in developing country can affect fiscal policies. right? According to the second, so my contribution to the second generation is adding a developing country, which is China, into the story and explain how politics in developing country can influence or impact the outcome of fiscal policies. For the second questions, you mentioned that there is like administration reform to reduce the 5-tier of government to the 3 tiers. But based on my knowledge, this hasn't been successful because I went to went to my fieldwork, and I interviewed 5 provinces. I interviewed their the officials in the fiscal bureau, and they all say that the intergovernmental transfers at the subnational level is ultimately decided by the provincial government. So, like the municipal government and county governments, they have little say in the distribution of the fiscal transfers. It's just like the central government transfer to the money to the provincial level, and the provincial government, they have the fiscal autonomy, to distribute like at the sub-provincial levels. And the sub-provincial level governments, they have no say. They have no power to influence or to argue how much they should receive. It ultimately depends on the provincial government. So in this paper, I will argue that it is important to understand at the provincial governments, as the governors, they have strong autonomy, and they, like this graph I can show you, like the provincial government or subnational government.
They are the closest to central committee.
Yes.
President.
Yes. Any other questions?
No, I think we'll leave it here.
Thank you.
Could we ask you both to be in a picture with us?
Sure, of course.
We'll put that on our website.
Of course. Just make sure that